Hi, friends. I just really want to highly recommend the book, The Highly Sensitive Person's Guide to Dealing with Toxic People, How to Reclaim Your Power from Narcissists and Other Manipulators. And I am sharing this under the fair use terms. And I just want to see if this helps anybody, if this rings any bells for people. I'm going to play just a portion of it, and I highly recommend getting the book on Audible, or the author is Shahida Arabi. But I think it's very important material, and I'm just going to play a portion, and I may play portions in the future as well. But for now, I'll start with this.
Chapter 2, Benign and Malignant, the 5 types of toxic people. One of my former friends was obsessed with having a boyfriend. She would jump from relationship to relationship, spending most of her time, energy, and savings on each new beau. I would often offer support and validation through her relationship problems. However, when I suffered a grueling loss, she abandoned me in the days that followed and accused me of being selfish for expecting her to support and for letting her know I was hurt.
Okay, so I'm going to actually fast forward. There's another section, so bear with me.
By her behavior. My former friend has traumas. They may still engage in gaslighting and projection personality, whereas narcissistic and sociopathic/psychopathic personalities fall into the malignant toxic type category. The spectrum of toxicity requires that we take into account the context of the person's behaviors, the frequency with which they use manipulation to get their way, how receptive they are to feedback, and whether they address your concerns empathetically and effectively. You must adapt boundaries based on your own levels of personal safety and perceived harm. There are 5 common types of toxic people. 3 fall under the benign umbrella, and 2 under malignant. I have included stories that illustrate just how they operate and offer tips for how to address the problems their behaviors cause you.
So I'm trying to find the part about gaslighting, so bear with me again.
Benign toxicity, or past traumas, rigid label, but setting bounds most benign out of the selfish or otherwise unable to read social cues. Steve's overbearing mother discussion about pets and blindly move on to a more receptive target receive attention. She would wear a desk every morning, and if Heidi refuses to abide by it, demand to see her grandchildren, keeping her phone off. For it to work, situation clearly by him headed off to sleep now, but even if you are nervous to set up, what is one positive way you can reinforce the desired things can you do? Interactions, friendships, subjects you to the silent treatment. Stonewalls during conflicts. Here is an acronym to help you remember the characteristic. Okay, I think we're here. So sorry about it. I just heard some really great material, and I just want to offer it here for posterity. So thank you again for your patience. And behaviors of a narcissist. N. Never admits to being wrong. A. Avoids emotions and accountability. R. Rages if anyone challenges them. C. Childish when they don't get their way. I. Instills doubt in their victims. S. Stonewalls during conflicts. S. Smears and slanders you. I. In denial and gaslights you. S. Subjects you to the silent treatment. D. triangulates you and tears you down. Joanne's boyfriend was a narcissist.
Okay, so that's a good overview of malignant narcissism. So I'm trying to find the part, there's a part about stonewalling that I think is very helpful. And let me know what you think once I get there.
He'd been charming and generous. So will your rights. When you assert your boundaries, the narcissist will take that information as a clue as to what will most hurt you, and they will use that as ammunition against you to further provoke you. In other words, when you tell a narcissist what hurts you, they will simply do more of that. That's why direct or diplomatic communication with them often falls short of inspiring, effective results. It's important to realize that you have a right to step away from any abusive person, whether the abuse is verbal, emotional, psychological, physical, or sexual. Making a safety plan to get away from an abuser is crucial, especially if there is any threat of violence or physical aggression. In a scenario like this, you would be better off not telling the abuser you are leaving until you have already left and found a safe place. Even then, communication with them should be short, factual, and presented with no door left open for the narcissist to sneak back into your life.
So I'm just trying to find this other part.
You can be cordial, but do not go off center, and no matter how much they try to provoke you, future. Just because you feel stuck in a toxic workplace now doesn't mean you'll be there forever. Just because you feel unable to leave a toxic relationship at the moment doesn't mean you have to stay in it for life. Make a plan for the future. Save money, build good credit, and explore your options. If you're married to a narcissist, obtain the services of a divorce financial planner and a lawyer who is well-versed in high-conflict personalities. In the workplace, also be absolutely necessary when your Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DPD, PCLR. Glibness and superficial charm. Pathological lying, PhD. List these additional characteristics specific to psychopaths in the Hare Psychopathy Checklist Revised, PCLR. Glibness and superficial charm. Pathological lying. Parasitic lifestyle. Cunning and manipulative. Impulsivity. Callousness and lack of empathy. Shallow emotions. Need for stimulation. Shallow affect. Irresponsibility. Failure to take responsibility for their behavior. Lack of realistic long-term goals. Sexual promiscuity. Prone to boredom. Early behavioral problems or juvenile delinquency. A number of short-term marital relationships. Criminal versatility. Grandiose sense of self. Sociopaths and psychopaths are the most malignant of the toxic types. Not only do they lack empathy, but they also lack remorse and a conscience. Some show violent tendencies and engage in criminal behavior, like the murdering husbands Scott Peterson and Chris Watts you heard about earlier. And others are seemingly upstanding citizens who don a mask and commit relational transgressions behind closed doors. Either way, they are likely to engage in high-risk activities, multiple affairs, fraud, duplicitous con artistry, and exploitation of people for their own gain. They leave a trail of victims, and they also take sadistic pleasure in harming others. I've created an acronym to help you remember the defining traits of a psychopath. P. Pathological liar. S. Superficially charming. Y. Yearns for constant stimulation. C. Conscienceless and callous con artist. H. Hides double life. O. Overestimates self. Grandiose. P. Parasitic lifestyle and promiscuity. A. Aggressive and impulsive. T. Taunts and traumatizes for fun. H. Hides in plain sight. In the infamous case of Mary Jo Buttafuoco, her sociopathic husband.
So I'm just going to keep going.
Setting boundaries with a sociopath or psychopath. Because of the dangers involved, setting boundaries with these predatory types calls for a different set of standards and safety protocols. If you suspect you are dealing with someone who is a sociopath or psychopath, do not pass go. Avoid any face-to-face meetings. You must put your safety first. Here are some basic guidelines to follow. Notify all those you trust that you may be dealing with someone who is potentially dangerous. Tell a trusted therapist, a close friend, or a family member, preferably someone who isn't close to this person, your concerns about what this person might do. This way, at least a few people will know what's going on in case anything should happen to you. Contact law enforcement if there is any stalking, harassment, or threats involved. The documentation you've collected, texts, email, voice messages, etc., will corroborate your claims. Do not let the person know your whereabouts. Place privacy controls on your social media to limit information you give out to the public. In the early stages of dating someone, closely guard your identity and personal information. Instead of using your actual phone number, use a number from a texting app or Google Voice.
So I just want to say, considering what is going on in the world today, does any of this seem familiar? For instance, right here, they're talking about privacy. Do we notice that there's these large organizations that want access to all of our information, like social media wants all to know where we are at all times? A certain large email company, email search engine is able to track us, as well as the social media app is able to track us. So it is like these organizations themselves actually are malignant, toxic, malignant, narcissistic entities, even though it's an organization, even though it's a social media company or a tech company or whatever. I have noticed this type of behavior in companies, even alternative health companies. I have found this to be the case. So what this book is saying, cautioning people to protect themselves from psychopaths, and I think there's psychopathic organizations, and I do believe that good people are actually working for psychopathic organizations because the psychopathic organization is prestigious. And I think this can be any type of organization. And I do believe, because of just so many influences on our culture today, that more companies than not are psychopathic, more companies than not are narcissistic. And I've heard like Mike Adams complain about entry-level workers not working at the McDonald's or Anomaly also complaining about entry-level workers not subjecting themselves to the masking, the injection threats. And I think those people are despicable for bashing the entry level worker who has the worst rental options available to them. They have the worst work conditions available to them. They do not have any rights. Nobody is protecting their rights. OSHA is not clearly OSHA is not protecting employed people's rights. How dare you? How dare you, Mike Adams and Anomaly and anybody else that's bashing, like the guy who started Gab, he deleted my comment about this very thing when I was saying that entry level people have the worst conditions, the worst working conditions, they have the least amount of protections. He deleted my comment, so I don't use Gab because that is another censorship platform, and this guy claims to be Christian. So that is not Christian. You do not bash the most vulnerable, the most important people in our world. And what do you think their work life is like? I mean, what do you think their home life is like? Do you think they have a very nice apartment that has quiet people, that has no ambient sounds from large refrigeration, air, like, how outside ghetto dwellings there's always this loud noise, this large fan, or the cell phone tower right there, or you know bad smells from the Superfund site right next door or something like that. So that entry level worker is not living in a nice place, and they're paying $1,000 for this crappy place that they're living. And for those who are on Section 8, that's still a horrible place, because who's living in that Section 8 building? So people who are terminally ill, who are also selling drugs because they have access to the best drugs that the doctors are happy to prescribe to this person, because the doctors are getting a cut and probably turning a blind eye. And there's prostitution and there's crime that goes on in a lot of these places, and nobody does anything about it because I don't because the crime that goes on is just it's part of it is what the Freemasons, the Satanists in the area, they want crime, they want evil to occur, they want to harm people. So we are in a satanic world, and it just becomes clearer to me day by day. But I still haven't gotten to the part about, there's a part about gaslighting and stonewalling. So if we don't get to this before I end this video, learn about stonewalling, which is when the other person, let's say you say, hey, we need to talk because my feelings are getting hurt in this situation, and the person just cuts you off. Now, my experience with stonewalling is taking online classes or participating in a work-related Facebook group where like I buy a lot of supplements and I promote a particular supplement line, and I ask just reasonable questions that are totally aligned with the mission of the organizations, and I get stonewalled, and which means that my questions aren't answered, my comment is shadow banned, and then when there's the live calls, somebody can ask like this 10-sentence question. They go through the 10-sentence question, a stupid question even, if I may say so, and but they ignore my one sentence all the time, like every week, every time, uh, and uh, and then they're like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't get to your questions," but they'll answer somebody else's question, like somebody else, multiple times. So it's like they'll, I don't know if it's playing favorites, but that's stonewalling. And then gaslighting is a term taken from a movie in 1944, where this husband tries to make his wife think she's crazy so he can put her in the mental institution and steal all her money. And I think that's kind of almost what's going on today. So right now, people are being stonewalled they're being censored or shadow banned, and then they're also being gaslit about certain issues. So they're told that they're crazy if they don't go along with the mainstream narrative, and that's evil, and it's a manipulation tool, and it's being used worldwide, in my opinion. So, anyways, I'm trying to get to that part. I'm trying to find that part in this book. So let's see if I can find it before I have to stop it, the video.
Calls. Don't reveal where you live, and always meet in a public place.
So I would just say, look at this. If we need to apply this to social media organizations that are trying to track us, to online apps that are trying to track us. Those online apps, those social media organizations, and those principalities that are trying to track us, they have no business tracking us. And they are displaying psychopathic, malignant, narcissistic behavior, folks.
Avoid going up people who exhibit the behaviors covered in this chapter. Next to each name, write down which of the 5 categories of toxicity. We'll dive more deeply into toxicity playbook, countering manipulation tactics. Even though it was many years ago, I still remember the night I walked into my local police precinct in Manhattan to get my first ever restraining order at 3 a.m. I just received another threatening message from my ex-boyfriend when I dialed 911. I filled out the police report carefully, my hand trembling, and my heart beating what felt like 1,000,000 times per minute. Thankfully, I had all the evidence I needed. I had documented the dozens of missed calls from anonymous phone numbers, the messages from fake email addresses, and the incessant texts he had sent every day to taunt me and try to ensnare me back into the relationship. He had even created a fake email address with my name with a reference to my books in it to remind me that he was always watching and that he would try to sabotage me. This wasn't surprising, considering he had subjected me to pathologically envious outbursts during the course of our relationship. This time I was prepared. In response to the barrage of messages that ranged from love-bombing to rageful, I spoke to him calmly, stating only the facts, and told him to stop harassing me. When he continued to do so, I did not let him know I was calling the police. It took a day or so, but my ex-boyfriend was eventually arrested for harassment, and I was granted a restraining order after he was released. After that, he never contacted me again. Sadly, not all victims are so lucky. Many continue to be harassed and stalked by their partners years after they leave them. Some are even killed, and in some cases, restraining orders can worsen the situation. In order to effectively tackle toxic people and narcissists, we have to be prepared. We have to learn the ins and outs of their behavior, why they do what they do, what their agenda is, and how we can react in ways that best protect us. We briefly went over some of the behaviors toxic people use in Chapter 1. As we address more of them in further detail here, keep in mind this distinction. The garden variety types occasionally use these tactics to get what they want, some of them even unknowingly. But the malignant types use these manipulation techniques as a way of life. They employ them frequently and excessively, not only to achieve their agendas, but also to provoke emotional reactions in others. Many of these tactics serve as diversionary methods to silence and belittle you. As you listen to the stories that follow, see if you recognize some of these tactics and behaviors from your own relationship history. Stonewalling and the silent treatment. Occasionally in a relationship, someone might want a break from an argument to cool off. When that happens, they communicate respectfully that this is what they need. Benign toxic types or more avoidance-oriented people may sometimes use stonewalling, an outright refusal to communicate, to avoid discussions that present a threat to the relationship. With malignant types, however, it's drastically different. Narcissists use stonewalling in spades to emotionally invalidate and silence their victims. It's a way to cause their victims intense emotional pain, to one-up them and provoke them into losing control. According to researchers Kipling Williams and Steve Nida, being socially ostracized or ignored, like being on the receiving end of stonewalling and the silent treatment, activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the same part of the brain that registers physical pain. Being shut down like this can be just as painful as getting punched in the face. As a survivor, Lauren described, "My narcissistic ex-boyfriend would retaliate by subjecting me to unreasonable and lengthy periods of the silent treatment, usually in response to me trying to express my emotions about something he did or said, or a boundary that he crossed. He went cold on me and disengaged from me when I found out that my father had been diagnosed with lung cancer. The stonewaller does not allow you to have thoughts, opinions, or perceptions that differ from their own. They prefer to talk over you, shut you out, or cut off the lines of communication altogether. They invalidate your perspective and emotions, withdraw any kind of acknowledgement of your concerns, and issue ultimatums that coerce you into complying with their demands out of fear and obligation. Stonewalling causes victims to emotionally suppress and sacrifice their authentic emotions, which, according to research, lowers well-being and the quality of the relationship. As researcher John Gottman discovered, stonewalling is one of the 4 communication styles in a relationship. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as he called them, that can predict its inevitable end. The others are defensiveness, contempt, and criticism, all of which will also figure in the other manipulation tactics we'll discuss in this chapter. In healthy relationships, dyadic coping, the process by which one partner responds supportively to another person's stress signals by validating the partner's feelings, giving advice, or providing practical support, builds a stable foundation for the relationship. Dyadic coping is a reliable predictor of relationship quality, intimacy, and stability. When both partners are attuned to each other's needs, transparent and reciprocal in the way they validate each other's experiences, they feel safe in sharing their emotions and know they will be seen, heard, and supported. Shutting down conversations before they even begin is a surefire way to escape accountability and destroy intimacy and dyadic coping in a relationship. This demand-withdraw pattern in relationships, where one person withdraws and the other becomes increasingly demanding and anxious in response, causes depression in the victims of stonewalling and further conflict in the relationship. While some partners, especially male partners, have a habit of using stonewalling to avoid conflict, what happens is that it actually causes more emotional tension and unresolved issues. Stonewalling is even more powerful when it is callous, cold and charged with manipulative intent. When malignant narcissists withdraw, they do so to make you beg for their approval. As psychologist Jeff Pipe, doctor of psychology, writes, in relationships, stonewalling is the emotional equivalent to cutting off someone's oxygen. The emotional detachment inherent to stonewalling is a form of abandonment. Stonewalling evokes initial feelings of terror, followed by feelings of anger and more futile efforts to get some reaction or resolution from the stonewaller. When these attempts fail, the person being stonewalled feels abandoned, uncared for, and unloved, as the following example of Lydia shows. Lydia is concerned with the way her partner, John, has been treating her. His temper has been out of control, and he has been relentlessly criticizing her. On her birthday, she attempts to bring up his behavior to him during dinner. In response, he invalidates her, telling her that she's overreacting. When she tries to explain how hurt she is by his recent remarks, he aggressively says, "I am done talking," and abruptly leaves, exiting the apartment with no explanation and abandoning her on her birthday. When Lydia tries
So that is a good part about stonewalling, and I'm just going to fast forward.
asserts that this tactic is a favorite of narcissists. You to associate setting boundaries with devastating consequences. Manipulative predators often use the silent treatment to induce a sense of fear, obligation, and guilt in you, so that you end up begging for their approval or acquiescing to what they want. Licensed mental health counselor Richard Swalinski asserts that this tactic is a favorite of narcissists. The silent treatment can be used as an abusive tactic that is the adult narcissist's version of a child's holding my breath until you give in and give me what I want. If you've endured this type of manipulation, know that your feelings of abandonment are a normal reaction. Stonewalling and the silent treatment in the hands of a narcissist can be agonizing and excruciating. Tips on breaking through stonewalling and the silent treatment. When you're being given the silent treatment, use it as a period of freedom and self-care. Rather than reaching out to the person ignoring you, become mindful of your emotions and identify how this person is making you feel. Reframe the experience as an opportunity to detach from this person, and as a reminder that you do not deserve this treatment. Remember that when a narcissist stonewalls you or subjects you to the silent treatment, they want you to respond. They want you to chase after them and plead for their attention. They want to provoke you. They want to control and diminish you. If you're being stonewalled and have tried to communicate your feelings to no avail, realize that the problem is not you. If this is a chronic problem, you must step away from self-blame and stop walking on eggshells in an attempt to please someone who will not be pleased. A toxic person's communication patterns cannot be changed unless that person is willing to change them. While stonewalling can be improved in healthier relationships where both people are willing to work to heal dysfunctional patterns, in an unhealthy relationship with a pathological partner, self-care and self-protection are paramount. There comes a time when it is far better to walk away and stop speaking to this person who is not interested in listening to you. Otherwise, you're just feeding into their sick mind games. When a narcissist stonewalls you, save your voice for people who actually respect you and engage in self-care. Journal reflection. Instances of stonewalling. Write down some instances when you've been shut down in a conversation. How did you feel? What were you unable to express? In the future, how can you take better care of yourself when you encounter stonewalling? Gaslighting. Gaslighting is an insidious form of manipulation that aims to erode your sense of reality. When a toxic person gaslights you, they engage in crazy-making discussions in which they challenge and invalidate your thoughts, lived experiences, emotions, perceptions, and sanity. Gaslighting enables narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths to exhaust you to the point where you are unable to fight back. Rather than finding ways to healthily detach from this toxic person, you are sabotaged in your efforts to find a sense of certainty and validation in what you have experienced. The term gaslighting first originated in Patrick Hamilton's 1938 Gaslight, a play about a manipulative husband who drives his wife to the brink of insanity by causing her to question her own reality. It was also popularized in the famous 1944 film adaptation, Gaslight, a psychological thriller about a man named Gregory Anton who murders a famous opera singer and later marries her niece, Paula. Gregory messes with his wife's sense of reality by causing her to believe that her aunt's house is haunted, so she can be institutionalized and he can gain access to the rest of her family jewels. He rearranges items in the house, flickers gas lights on and off, and makes disturbing noises in the attic. After manufacturing these crazy-making scenarios, he then convinces Paula that all these events are a figment of her imagination. He isolates her so that she is unable to seek support for the terror she is experiencing. He even recruits numerous third parties to reinforce this new false reality. For example, he brings in the maids to confirm that they did not move a painting and convinces Paula that she was the one who must have moved it, even though she has no recollection of doing so. It is only when an outsider, an inspector, confirms to her that the gas lights are indeed flickering that she realizes she had been right all along. This movie mirrors what many survivors go through when being covertly abused and isolated. They feel like they are losing their minds and cannot trust themselves. It is usually when they find an inspector of their own who validates their perceptions that they identify the elaborate attempts to undermine them. The reason gaslighting is so effective is that the repetition of alternative facts alone can be powerful enough to dissuade us from holding on to our truth. Researchers discovered that when a statement is repeated multiple times, even when it is false and when subjects are aware that it is false, it is more likely to be rated as true simply due to the effect of repetition. This effect is even more powerful when the listener is tired or distracted by other information, as is often the case with victims of gaslighting when hit with the abuser's denials. Familiarity with the claim also plays a tremendous role in whether we believe it, sometimes even trumping credibility. Manipulators who gaslight with the intention of rewriting history use this illusory truth effect to their advantage. They repeat falsehoods so often that they become instilled in the minds of their victims as irrefutable truths, causing you to doubt your own reality, question the status of your mental health, and lose trust in your perceptions allows a manipulative person to get away with problematic behavior more easily. While they're busy rewriting history, you're too busy attempting to reconcile what you've seen, heard, and witnessed with the toxic person's claims to get a firm understanding of how your boundaries have been violated. It's common for malignant narcissists to gaslight their victims by saying things like, "I never said that," "You're overreacting," "You're oversensitive," or "You're blowing things way out of proportion." Another common way narcissists gaslight their victims is by pathologizing them, behaving as if they are authoritative doctors diagnosing their unstable patients. Some domestic abusers go so far as to directly interfere with the mental health of their victims in order to concoct more evidence that the victim is losing it. This weakens the credibility of their victims and depicts them as unstable or unhinged when they speak out against the abuse. In fact, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, NDVH, does not recommend couples therapy with an abuser, as therapy can be a space where victims are further violated and gaslighted. The NDVH, along with the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health, estimate that 89% of its callers have experienced some form of mental health coercion from their abusers, and that 43% have experienced substance abuse coercion. These abusers actively contributed to the mental health or substance use difficulties of their partners, and then threatened to use this information against them in legal proceedings, such as child custody cases. Everyday gaslighting can occur due to errors or misinterpretations, but deliberate gaslighting is executed with an agenda in mind. As therapist Stephanie Sarkis notes, malignant narcissists have a goal when it comes to gaslighting. The goal is to make the victim or victims question their own reality and depend on the gaslighter. In the case of a person who has a personality disorder, such as antisocial personality disorder, they are born with an insatiable need to control others. Gaslighters use shaming, punishment, and emotional invalidation when their victims call out their abuse. Chronic gaslighting can cause an immense amount of fear, anxiety, self-doubt, and cognitive dissonance, that state of inner turmoil that arises due to contradictory and conflicting beliefs. On the one hand, the victim is noticing something that is amiss, not quite right. On the other, the victim feels blindsided by the gaslighter's authoritative and continual invalidation of their reality and perceptions.
So I'm just stopping this now. So this is the book, The Highly Sensitive Person's Guide to Dealing with Toxic People. And we are in chapter 3 at the 3-hour mark. So I may come back to share more of this under the fair use clause or whatever that's called. And oh, it looks like I have some, so funny how I have a lot of spam on my channel. So anyways, I'm just dealing with that right now. But anyway, I highly recommend this book, and thank you for listening. God bless.